Alrighty, I'm super excited to welcome everyone to the Ops Cross Stage ThinkBIG session. This is our session number 4, and I'm excited to see that participation is not dropping. It would be nice to have more people, but we'll talk about that later. For those who may be joining this session for the first time, I just wanted to spend like 2 minutes on some housekeeping and goals behind this session. So we are aiming to collect people cross-stage groups together for some discussions. Mostly we're trying to bring product management and product designers together to chat about some ideas, some topic, user insights that we've been hearing, bring ideas together and maybe brainstorm around those quickly to get some ideas going. Of course, we are also open for anybody who just wants to join in and listen, or those people who have like a topic that has a dependency on other stage groups and maybe something that other groups have been solving before and your stage is about to go into that direction. That's a good place to discuss such kind of topics. Or maybe you clearly know that that it's not only your stage who's going to be thinking about a certain feature or about solving a certain problem for the user. So these topics are perfect for these sessions to be discussed. We are using this for brainstorming together. The goal here from these sessions is to have a couple of ideas being sparkled, and then we creating an issue out of these sessions, and then we are assigning the ThinkBIG label that we have created to track the sessions. So from the previous experiences, we learned that we are trying to limit the session to the 2 topics. So we have an agenda in the document. Per each session, we are collecting 2 ideas that we're going to be discussing. And there is also a retrospective issue that's at the top of the agenda document. Feel free to leave your feedback. It's very important for us. We want to improve and make sure that we keep the sessions interesting. So today our star for topic is Viktor for topics. He actually had a nice 2 ideas for discussions where he will need some of the cross-stage group feedback. And I'm excited to give the stage over to you, Viktor. I'm going to be helping you to keep eye on the time. So we spend
Thank
like
you. I wanted to ask for that. So thank you everyone for joining this session. So the first topic that I added is about the Kubernetes, GitLab Kubernetes Agent. I'll give you as much background as I can because probably you are not really familiar with it. So to get started, let's see what is Kubernetes and how does it integrate with GitLab. Kubernetes is basically a computer, that's it. To put it simple, a pretty complex computer that you can manage only through API calls. And why it's a pretty awesome computer. That's why it's so famous, let's say. And basically, you can currently even create Kubernetes clusters from within GitLab, but we are not talking about that part, but what it requires to manage, to have any kind of integration with clusters today. Our support integration actually requires you to allow administrative rights to the cluster, which is something people don't like to give. And yeah, I just saw the the comment. So one of the shortcomings we have with the current approach within GitLab is that it requires administrative rights, and the other is that it requires you to open up your cluster to the internet actually, if you want to use gitlab.com with your cluster. So this is how we started to idea that how could we solve these 2 really big problems with the current integration, because we received as a feedback from basically all of our customers that this is a huge problem, and many people are not really happy to provide us these things like cluster admin rights and opening up their clusters. And we got to the conclusion what is not a new thing in the industry, which is to have an agent running in the cluster and actually the agent reaches out to gitlab.com and not the other way around. So that's what the GitLab Kubernetes agent is basically. It's our spy inside the cluster who can talk to gitlab.com, and actually it has a continuous connection to gitlab.com. And it's already sitting inside the private network of the user, so it can do everything that it has rights to do inside that cluster. But once we have it, we overcome the problem of authorization. It's really easy to specify what rights the agent will have, and the agent will be able to do just those things that it has rights to do. So this is problem solved, that part. On the other hand, there are plenty of opportunities coming up with an agent approach, and I think this is my question number 3, where I would not even 3. Oh, okay. These were just the notes from now. Yeah, I would start with actually question number 5, which is that as we have the agent inside the cluster, actually we have an active presence inside that cluster. And this opens a huge space of new opportunities. Like right now, you have to either install Prometheus from within GitLab in order for GitLab to know about it, or you have to manually set up your Prometheus inside GitLab for GitLab to know about it. And actually, if we have the agent in the cluster, we can teach the agent to look for the most common spaces where a Prometheus installation can be found and automatically set up Prometheus integration. So this is great for getting metrics and actually supporting other stages and other groups inside GitLab. Similarly, there might be possibilities for doing security scans inside the cluster on deployed things, which is another possibility inside of GitLab. So there are a few new area of opportunities that the agent actually opens up. And if you have any ideas around this, that in your stage something was discussed where you think it would be good to be more close to the environment where code is running, then please tag those to me, because that could be interesting as a use case for the agent in the future. So this is what question number 5 is about. Please start talking if you have anything to say, because otherwise I will just continue with other questions. I think this is the most important question to all of us, basically, because this is something totally cross-stage question. Our group itself can come up with our own needs, but really support everyone else. We need your insights there. So I will. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
One question that I always run into whenever I look at our stages, I think about the work that you're doing as infrastructure as code and maintaining like the infrastructure base for customers, whereas release is focused on application deployment. And I'm wondering if there's ways that we can leverage these agents for application development and not just like infrastructure as code. What are your thoughts on how can I reconcile this in my head? Like I feel like sometimes we compete in that area.
I totally agree. So there's a huge overlap between our areas, actually, because I used to say this, that from one side, there's the two sides of the same coin. From one side, you deploy software to cluster. This is your approach to releases. My approach to releases is that you modify your infrastructure. And we speak about the same thing, actually. So there's definitely you treat it well. I think that there is a huge overlap between our approaches, and I'm discussing it basically continuously with Orit as well, that what should be the responsibility of her group, your group, my group, etc., because it's totally messy right now. So basically, given this situation, clearly there are many opportunities for deployments. The first thing we want to do is to provide deployments into the cluster using the agent. So that's how we want to start. But even after that, there might be even other things, like how we do monitoring today is I think rather limited, and having the agent opens up again new possibilities for that. I don't know. Yep.
kind of one of my thoughts that I've been kicking around is this idea of environments being proxies for deployments for customers. And how do we create like a distinction of an environment that's connected to a production cluster or a production state? And how do we treat those as like different first-class objects? Because production states are, I've heard higher level, I've heard a bunch of different words to attribute that this is a glorified environment and deployment, right? But it's interesting because clusters can run, you can have, you know, thousands of clusters running production environments. So how do we think about agents in that respect, that these customers that are managing many deployments to a production environment and needing to do different things with those environments versus clusters in a lower level?
Yeah, there are so many questions you asked in seemingly one question. So,
Sorry, I'm like a jerk in that regard.
Yeah, I can give you a few examples what other CD tools do. Like I just reviewed Argo CD. I'm sure you watched the video I created. But basically what Argo CD does, for example, just to give you an example on this topic, is that they have a use case where they assume that you are not happy to install anything on your production cluster because your production cluster is glorified. And as a result, you still want an agent to be running inside your private network in a staging cluster, for example, or QA cluster. And that agent has to have access to the other clusters to deploy everything from within your network. So this is one use case which is around this, that you have a glorified cluster that even though we are allowed inside the private network, we are not allowed on to that cluster. We don't want to support this use case at first, but we know about it and we are waiting for customer feedback, whether it's needed or not. To go again to the point of environments, I think there's really basically everything, everybody calls a different thing an environment. What I see is like another topic that I'm responsible for is infrastructure as code and not Kubernetes management. And there, basically now I see that I set up my Kubernetes cluster, my production cluster using Terraform, and I call that my production environment, which is actually not the cluster, but everything around the cluster, like the Google project and the buckets and all those things. That's my production environment. And I run my production cluster in my production environment, and I deploy my production code into my production cluster. And basically, during a single interview, the interview participants call all of these production environments. So there's a huge mass of vocabulary of what the environment actually means. And I have no idea how to clean this up. But I have some ideas how to make it complicated on our UI.
I'm running into that same problem though, whenever I'm talking to users about managing things at scale and wanting to see the health of their higher level environments. Because even though like if it's a high risk application, for example, that they're supporting, they have multiple production layers that they're potentially running. And then of course, when we look at like Orit side of the house, blue-green deployments where you have multiple versions running on clusters and you're rolling out progressively, we see a bunch of needs around production environments like what you're saying, but oftentimes they are conflated with clusters, you know, like they're described as the same thing.
Yeah, I see the same. Seriously, I just see a huge mess. Sure.
I'm wondering if Jackie is talking about the visibility of clusters and environments.
I think she would need some physics.
She ran away from my question.
So I had this leaky toilet and it's been leaking for like months. We've had a Tupperware container underneath it and the plumber finally came. So sorry. But
No
keep going. You're saying, am I talking about environments in the UI versus
the visibility? Yeah, about the visibility or the actual kind of system setup. So are you talking about in the UI, I want to see all the environments, all the clusters in each environment and all the projects that are running on each cluster?
So I like that you're needling into this. So for release management, we talk about legacy deployments. So legacy deployments could be a server, it could be a mainframe, it could be a random bucket in AWS, it can be anything. So an environment is the target for that. In cloud native installations and Kubernetes first installations, that target is like a particular cluster, but the environment has a bunch of other information that creates those relationships between microservices. So in the UI, there's no difference. You have just a URL that specifies the cluster, and it doesn't really take into context that there's a bunch of stuff around that cluster that really makes up that production experience for a customer. Whereas in other instances, it really is just a URL to an AWS environment, and that is the only thing that the application is running on, right? It's a single tenant application, for example, it's a SaaS application that's live on that target environment URL. And this is where it gets challenging to try to support all of these use cases in one object. And that's what we're doing with environments. We're shoehorning cluster management into environments as well as legacy deployments into environments.
Actually, just this morning, I created an issue. I've only shared it with Maria until now, and I'm not sure that it would be a solution for this topic, but at least it could be a starting point, which is that we want to provide some visibility into your infrastructure environments, lower level than Kubernetes, let's say like that. As well, at first, my idea would be just to have a simple listing of the Terraform projects that we are aware of, which is kind of like a Kubernetes cluster. And we could try to, and basically with Maria, we started to discuss this topic like in the past week, that we should have something really generic, which just says that infrastructure. And then inside of the infrastructure, you might mean virtual machines, you might mean even mainframes if you want. It might mean Kubernetes, it might mean the Google project that runs that Kubernetes. So we can, as with the repository, we can have various ways of infrastructure, various levels of infrastructure definitions, but I definitely don't have a good idea how to do it in general.
Do we have a single place to document all the customer use cases, or not just customer, but whoever might be out there, and they have a different kind of implementation? That would help design kind of figure out for well, what you said, like in some cases there is just a cluster in each environment. In some cases there are whole things wrapped around these clusters.
Yeah, so in Q2, I kicked off this research around environments, and this is where I started to learn that like environments are a generic term to mean deployment, and there isn't like a place today that documents or distinguishes these things. I don't think we've treated them differently either.
And I don't think customers are happy with environments either, because they can only add one cluster per environment. This is not realistic from what I hear.
I agree with you. Environments are very challenging for people in both the legacy deployment style to use, because they may have different environments per stage, and it could be multiple layers that they're going at, and they have to specify that in their YAML as a separate job. And that's really hard whenever you have a bunch of microservices that you're also deploying in alongside like a single production environment. So I would say that people who aren't deploying with GitLab, that's their biggest complaint, is that environments are inflexible and they're unable to accomplish all the things they're wanting to do with monitoring, deployment, and like more progressive rollout either. So incrementally, there's a couple of things that we're doing to make this easier. One, like allowing the sharing of environments across groups. And then we do need to kind of nail down, like, how do we want to treat clusters differently than environments? And maybe they become a different object, but we should consider that fracture.
Yeah, you mentioned here to share environments across groups. That's actually, I think, in itself a very interesting question. What is the right level of abstraction here? Whether we should elevate things at the group level, instance level, or project level, because that's again something very specific. Like what I run into, for example, is that I was thinking about cluster cost management, and all our metrics pages are at the project level. And I would like to see metrics as part of the metrics, the cluster cost as well. But actually I have a group level cluster and I have no view for that. So it's like,
I have a feature coming out for this. It's called the CI/CD director dashboard at the group level. So I'll go ahead and share this issue here, but we can collaborate on different metrics that we'd want to be pulled into that dashboard. The original MVC was going to be aggregating project level metrics that are in the CI/CD analytics tab at the group level, and then providing more granular like drill down. And I was hoping to replace the current environments dashboard with that view so that you can filter off any project or group inside of your instance, right? So I'll link that here. Oh, somebody already got it. Look at you looking out. So I would say look at that issue, because that's also a pain point that I've seen when I talk to customers, is that just the visibility into what stuff they're doing it makes it impossible to manage deployments at scale. And cluster cost is a part of that for cloud native installations, obviously.
I wanted to add, by the way, that an important consideration for hierarchy level of implementation of features is that if we're considering GitLab.com, instance level is not available for users on GitLab.com. So group is kind of like the only place where such things should live. And we have subgroups as our option to further give granularity, even though I believe it's currently still not as well as supported as it should be.
Thanks. Yeah, I've seen that there are two questions in the doc. So Darren, which Kubernetes platforms does the agent currently support? None of them. That's the very quick answer. We started to develop the agent like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. We are currently having a proof of concept around that, but actually I would say that it could support anything, even perhaps OpenShift. So not just the vanilla Kubernetes like GK, AKS, etc., but we might be able to support OpenShift. Clearly, with OpenShift, as it has much tighter security and a different model of authorization, we will have to figure that out whether it's true, but we might be able to support it as well. For the Open Policy Agent, there's no overlap at all, actually. Open Policy Agent is about policy as code. So it specifies various things, what you can do inside the cluster given a certain action, as far as I understand. And with the agent is actually really a spy inside the cluster. So that's how you should think about it, that the agent acts on GitLab's behalf inside the cluster. It can run Open Policy Agent in Open Policy configurations inside the cluster as well. It just acts on behalf of GitLab. That's what the agent does. And by the way, we are building on the same code base right now that Argo CD and Flux are using. So this way we can already leverage a lot of the community's power.
Just a quick time check. We have like 20 minutes left. We're not sure if we want to transition to the next topic or keep with this one. Up to y'all.
Thanks, Jackie. Victor, your call. You have another topic as well. I'm not sure. It seems like this one is triggering quite some discussions, but maybe, maybe you want to move this to an issue, labeling it with ThinkBIG label, and maybe you want to continue that in the issue discussions. Up to you if you want.
Yeah, that was already so much feedback that I think we just have to continue outside of this discussion to even tie those threads down. So the other topic that I have I think is much more fun and interesting actually, is about raising awareness cross-stage way. And this came up when we were running customer interviews with Maria, that it was really fun to see that we had 2 GitLab users and 3 non-GitLab users. And the 3 non-GitLab users, as they didn't have any mental model preconceptions around what GitLab actually does, they understood our storyboards, while the 2 GitLab users didn't understand at all our storyboards. And we had to realize that they have no idea that we have Kubernetes integration at all. They just know that GitLab does source code management and CI. That's it. And it's great for that. And this was really shocking. So how badly they were not aware of anything related to our stage. And I've had a few ideas, but this was the first one that I actually brought down that you can see in the linked issue, which is about specifying where you want to deploy, which might not really be a deployment because it might be just a package registry. But what is the target of your project? And I thought about this for various reasons. One is that we have those small buttons to add license, add README, add CI file, etc. And I've seen proposals which would say that add an .npm RC file or something like that, but I think that doesn't scale well at all. Moreover, if we have this as a project setting that we actually know about the deployment, that can help with auto DevOps as well to figure out what the deployment target is. And that's a great usage ping data for us to know what are the deployment targets of our users, and we can optimize around that. If there are too many other choices, then we can just say that, okay, we have to figure out what those other things are and so on. So I just had this idea that you can see in the issue, and I really just would like to ideate what other possibilities you see to increase awareness and so on. One of my questions is, what are the other ways to auto-detect targets? Probably there are, but if we auto-detect targets, we won't know about it. That was Jackie's question, whether we could auto-detect it. So like auto DevOps, in a sense, currently that's what Orit is working on. They try to auto-detect it. It's not really auto-detection because they go with a very simple logic that if you have a Kubernetes cluster set up, then we try to deploy to that. If you don't have it, then we move on to EC2, and then we check if you have access to that, and then we deploy there. If not, then we just don't do anything.
Victor,
but
are you thinking about specifically like in product experiences to tell people about various features, or like more generally?
Basically, yes, but in a way that really fits in their workflow. So that is because, and this is what I was thinking of, that when I create a new project, I know 2 ways how I can create a project, actually 3, but 2 are just variants. One is on the UI, the other is just pushing my code to, if I have started already locally. I never use the second one because it usually fails for me, I don't know why. But so I always go through the UI. And through the UI, if I would be presented with this, that I can help you with deploying your code, I will be really interested at that point when I'm committing my first real commit to the repo. It might be just me who is working with CI tools for like a long time since he started to code basically. But that's something that I would be super happy about. And if I would have known about auto DevOps before, I would have been happy about that as well. But I wasn't, so I always created all kinds of deployment scripts initially. But that was the basic idea, and something very simple that we just could say that, yeah, I want to deploy to Kubernetes, and then first we can just show a documentation link and at the same time save user's choice. So we get already data of the deployment targets that our users actually have. And later we can expand it.
This is pretty relevant for from a release perspective. We often want to encourage, like our number one North Star metric is to drive deployments with GitLab. And part of the perception in the market is that GitLab is Kubernetes only, and being able to expand that awareness and usability in our platform, I think could be a good step forward to change that perception.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I would like to do is go through the user journey and see in which parts of the journey it's relevant for us to inject features of our stage. So buttons, links, any sort of functionality that would drive adoption. And just as a side note, the growth team is doing explorations of first-time user experiences. So we're working with the growth team to improve, I think, 3 first user experiences towards adoption. That's a side note.
I don't know if, so seriously, I'm here thinking of many things. The most important I have in my mind that it would be really great to have something integrated throughout GitLab. So it's not that I add my own button and then someone else adds a very similar button, just a bit different place and a bit different way. And that's why I think that's why actually I like this proposal, because this could be throughout the product used by many stages, I think.
I'm curious if any other product designers on the call from other stages have any thoughts around this. Maybe similar problems have been solved for other features.
One of the things that we're working on doing on the package side to kind of raise that awareness of what we can offer is trying to detect when they're moving away from GitLab. So if they're deploying, like for example, they have a job in a pipeline that deploys to a third-party registry, maybe there's an opportunity in the UI to say, hey, we saw you deploy out to here. Here's the advantage to doing that in GitLab, and then here's an action button that, for example, we noticed you went to NPM. This button will create a merge request to change your NPM RC file so that they'll deploy to GitLab instead. So kind of similar to what Maria, I think, was saying, where we focus on where those interaction points come in and then understand that user's journey and the user flow, and then identify that moment where we could change them over to GitLab and share with them that they have an opportunity with us.
To add, I see us not doing enough of that because users stay in one stage. So CI/CD doesn't have this problem because they're the most used stage. But then how do we drive people to go to the stages after? I see us lacking in this part.
I'm wondering what Jackie said about the perception that GitLab is only Kubernetes makes people shy away from exploring those things because they are afraid of Kubernetes.
I think they're not aware of many things, actually. It's not that they shy away, but you just don't know of its existence. Like if you're like me, who was developing, I don't know, all kinds of applications for tens of years, my initial commit already contains a build script. I will never learn about AutoDevOps.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that part. I think what I was wondering is if people kind of start like seeing all these options, you know, like deployment targets and everything, and they're like, you know, I don't care about these. I'm not interested in exploring Kubernetes yet, or like doing this. I'm just gonna use what I came for, you know, which is probably using just like the version control features and like the basic CI, you know, like they just stay there because it's their comfort zone. So I think what I'm asking is more a rhetorical question on whether we do enough for our customers to go and explore features in like that are outside of their comfort zone, you know?
I think that's a good one.
Sorry, Jackie, just real quick to that point one. The capstone project that Laria did, she found out from those who don't use CI or had just started using CI, one of the barriers was that they needed to convince their management to let them use it. So they may have used it prior in a different place, but they couldn't use it at their current place because everybody was, quote, afraid, or, quote, I don't know what to do with that, unquote. So it was like the biggest takeaway was in documentation, the documentation needed to start scaffolding new people. Stop assuming that they already know how to do this and show them how to do a new fancy feature. Actually take them from the beginning and walk them through how to use it, so then they can walk their management through why they need to start using auto DevOps in their company. That was one of their really big barriers.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, yes.
Go ahead, Jack.
The other thing is,
Okay. So I think another opportunity that I started to see is bringing people from the merge request into environments and into pipelines and into other areas of the application. So bringing awareness to secure or monitoring from a view that most customers are in. And after kind of validating that assumption with users, it's a challenge because of all the different personas that are in an organization that are purchasing GitLab, using GitLab, and sort of advocating for GitLab. And when you don't have the end state metrics, the buyers and the managers of the organization aren't interested in implementing additional features because they can't render the ROI, or they can't point and show the ROI when they're able to do that more effectively in an outside tool due to the way that their systems have been configured. So kind of in line with that same ethic that Lori was discussing, that they need permission to extend it. That's one of the things that we should be focusing on, is showing how we're able to drive ROI by using more things in GitLab for the end user.
But are you talking about specifically about the idea of someone moving one tier up to access more features?
No.
Oh, just like within their own tier.
Just breadth. Yeah, like if you're using SCM, like adopting releases for inner sourcing, which has nothing to do with CI. You just are publishing a release tag to show that this is the approved code version, and like just showing that there's other ways to consume things that are available to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I said that because I also heard in a couple of calls that people said, like, I like GitLab a lot, but sometimes what it's hard for me is to just like to go and justify like the cost rubric, like we go up one tier, or like if we are spending more in CI minutes, or like if we need, like this comes particularly from the idea of runners, like the context of runners, which runners by design need a different machine, like a different host environment. And because of that, like, yeah, I don't know, like the decision makers are like, well, we're paying for GitLab. Why do we need to pay for like this runner thing as well? Like it's that type of idea. So yeah, I just was trying to find some common ground if that was the case, but it seems that that's just another problem.
I would have a question that actually is rooted in Jan's comment, how you try to show people that they could use GitLab, which is that one thing I'm thinking a lot, and I don't have an answer at all, is that I would like to offer these possibilities, what Jackie spoke as well, and like that they could use Kubernetes integration, etc., at a place which is the most convenient for that specific topic. Like, I don't know, for what we did a few months ago is we created a small banner when you installed Knative, that whether you would like to give us feedback related to Knative, because then we knew that that person is probably interested in that and might be happy to support us. And the truth is, I don't see really good contact points with our users in this, because taking Jan's example with the npm package registry, if I have set up npm package registry already, I have a .npm.rc file already in my repo, then you are actually proposing me something that I already have. And it might be easier to use GitLab if I wouldn't have set it up yet. but I'm already over that. And that's why I'm thinking a lot that what might be the right point of contact where the user is really open to our suggestions, to our changes. MR might be interesting for some features for sure, but in many areas I don't see this point actually. I don't know if you understand my question.
Is it for me?
No, it's in general. Like Jan might have an answer to that because they, for some reason, are going with proposing this when they usually have an npm-rc file. So, but it can be anyone, and I'm more interested in the Kubernetes aspects of that. So I just don't have ideas for it.
For sure. So on the package side, when it comes to that npm-rc file, we have to demonstrate why it's more valuable to include it in GitLab. And so this is where the cross-stage opportunities really come up for us, where we can say we can include these kind of scannings and we can have better management, and you don't have to pay for that third party you're already having to deal with. And that's usually the selling point, is we can actually help reduce your costs because you don't have to pay for one of our competitors. We just offer it and it's here with the rest of your system. That's usually the kind of story that convinces customers to move over. So the package registry is just kind of getting that one initial point to like let them know, hey, this is available, and could make it easier for you.
I understand. I just understand the ROI argument. It's an interesting one. I could argue with it, but I don't want to. Still, I'm thinking like, what other groups have similar ideas? Like, what do they see as the best point? Like, because in the case of MRs, it's really, I can see security there to be shown, and that's great if you know about that. But what other, because I'm really just trying to get some more impulses from you, so we can come up with ideas as well ourselves.
I wonder if we were to like select a persona and drill into that user journey, and then we could find triggers that would make more sense. So if we're thinking about the developer, where are they most at when they go into GitLab? They're going to be in the project repository. They might be in the merge request. They'll likely be in a comment. Like, where do we pull relevant information into those feeds so that they know, oh, I can go to AWS from here, or I can manage a cluster from here, or I have a jump off point, right? This is very different than from like a release manager, where they might be at the group view and they may be looking at a milestone because they're trying to coordinate a version from multiple different repos that are being pulled into a single view. So we would want to be able to surface information on the issue rather than on the merge request about configuring, what word was that? Oh my goodness, configuring things like clusters and AWS targets and other sort of pieces. But there's also like people who are only using the API in GitLab. So we have, you know, probably 2/3 of our population that would not necessarily be cognizant or aware of these targets because those aren't surfaced in the API. So we need to render something in the documentation. And this is where things like blog posts, partner talks, engagement, like creating a marketing campaign around this information becomes more useful and more actionable, because we're not going to necessarily meet those people with this information, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add this, that if we go from this, then the question is what this person's motivations are, because the sole developer actually might not be interested at all in the ROIs of a given tool. He just doesn't care. On the other hand, a release manager might be interested already on that. That's yeah, totally valid. Thanks.
So we are about to an end of the time for the session, and I don't want to keep anyone longer than needed. Viktor, do you feel like you got a little bit of the answers that you've been searching for?
Yep, a lot of food for thought. So thank you all. Definitely, yeah.
If you wanna continue any of the conversations on any of the topics, feel free to create an issue or use an additional one. And we appreciate if you would add the ThinkBIG label to that so we can follow that later and track the progress as well. And yeah, tag the people who've been involved in the discussion. We took very detailed notes, so hopefully that could help you going further.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was
awesome.
really great.
Well, I would like to round up this session with saying thanks to everyone who attended. I really love that people are coming and being vocal. This is what really helps us. It's nice to see how many topics we actually have in common between the stage groups, and I'm sure there are much more. If you have any idea for next sessions, please leave it in the agenda. We have a table there. We have 2 sessions per each of 2 topics per each session. The next session is fully booked already, which is great. So, but yeah, if you need any help scheduling any of those, please feel free to contact me. I would love to help you. And if you have any feedback about how we can make these sessions better, there is a retrospective issue at the end of today's notes and also at the top of the agenda document. Thanks everyone, it was nice having you, and I see you in a few weeks.